Oh, whoops, wrong Google button, y'all, sorry. All right. So thank you, everyone. I know that many of you were here last week, so glad to see you again. Thank you for coming. And I know that many of you may be new. We're super glad to have you here. This is part of a webinar series. It's called Eyes on Infrastructure. We're talking all things infrastructure and climate in New Orleans. We're hearing from local experts and community leaders who are going to teach us about the landscape going on and different topics every week, and then how we can, make a difference on those things by sharing our data and community experiences on ISeeChange. We're doing this project with collaborators in Healthy Gulf and Committee for a Better New Orleans. I'm going to really quick throw it over to Nellie to tell us a little bit about what they're doing at CB&O, Committee for a Better New Orleans, and then we will jump into today's session.
Thank you so much, Caroline. It's wonderful to be able to co-host this series. I want to let you know that we are seeing a loading screen.
That is good to know. Screen. I will try to reboot that really quick.
No problem.
Go ahead and jump into everything.
I'm Nellie Katz, and I'm Executive Director of the Committee for a Better New Orleans. We are a nonprofit that is building healthy soil for the grassroots of New Orleans by empowering people with the knowledge, networks, and skills that they need to lead change. Right now, one of our most crucial programs is called Building Our Future, in which we are trying to make sure that New Orleans is prepared to make the most of historic levels of federal funding for infrastructure, and that they spend it in a way that the screen is good, Caroline, and that they spend it in a way that is equitable and helps reduce disparity in the city. Our main priorities through this program are to educate residents and stakeholders about climate change, about infrastructure, and about the process. And we're convening stakeholders as we do that. We're working to gather priorities from residents. This falls under that bucket. We're really excited to share how you can share your priorities today and throughout the series. And finally, we're strengthening proposals by providing this data to communities, to the city, and to nonprofits who may want to be applying for funding, as well as co-developing alongside the city and partners an infrastructure framework for actually what the city is going to do to make equitable investments in infrastructure possible. Drop your email in the chat if you want more information about that. We will be sending out a big email to everybody who registered to this webinar to invite them to our next meeting, which is on the 24th. That's my only little announcement here. I'll hand it back over to Caroline. Thank you all so much for joining us. We're really thrilled to have so much interest in this series.
Thanks, Nellie. So to just really quick frame where we are in this moment, if you joined us last week, you're going to become really good at this. If you're new, we just want to provide a little context. So right now where we are is that the federal government has uniquely decided to allot not just billions of dollars, but over $1 trillion of federal infrastructure funding. And the main question is, where in the United States is this funding going to go? Here in New Orleans, I'm sure each and every one of you has more stories than you can count as to why the city needs that funding, from flooded streets to dumping on sites to transportation needs. We certainly know that New Orleans could use a hand there. One of the key things that we need to work on is ensuring that this funding is equitably distributed. If this is not done with justice in mind, then we're not doing it correctly. So what we want to do through this series and through other efforts that we've been working on is to help build our collective knowledge around topics related to climate and infrastructure. So hearing from people in the city actively working on this, hearing from community leaders on the ground leading in these fields, and then also build our own ability to share our stories and share our experiences through ISeeChange, collect data, and provide that to decision makers, city leaders, to be able to hopefully secure that funding and bring it to our neighborhoods where it's needed most. We're really, really thrilled to be able to welcome some great guests this week. We're talking about litter, trash, pollution, dumping. So we're talking trash this week. Let's just put that out there. We're talking trash. We're also going to talk a little bit of blight, but we're talking trash. And first, we're going to hear from Tori, the director of the New Orleans Department of Sanitation. Matt, I'm going to throw it over to you and just give me that thumbs up when you want the next slide. And we'll go on from there.
All right. Thanks. Thank you, Caroline and Nellie, for inviting me to join in your session tonight. It's really exciting. I'm glad to be here. I'm Matt Tori. I'm the director for the City of New Orleans Department of Sanitation. Just to give you a little background about the Department of Sanitation, we're a relatively small department for a city of our size, a little under 70 employees. Large budget for folks that are familiar with the city budget, but most of that falls to third-party contractors, whether on the collection side, disposal side, where the majority of our costs are incurred, but no shortage of work for us to do. Our mission really is to provide for a clean and safe New Orleans and improve the quality of life for all neighborhoods. Really break down what we do between city services provided by the Department of Sanitation and then contractual services, which are done by our contractors. So our Department of Sanitation staff, provides for litter removal, illegal dumping removal throughout the city, 365 days a year. There's no days off for the Department of Sanitation in the city of New Orleans with all of the wonderful events that are happening here. We service over 2,000 public litter cans throughout the city and are always looking to expand that number. We're in the process of receiving several hundred new public litter cans that'll be coming in over the next couple of months. So we're certainly going to be looking for input on where those new public litter cans should be deployed throughout the city to help eliminate some litter on some major thoroughfares. We perform mechanical street sweeping and flushing on major thoroughfares and bridges throughout the city. In 2022, we swept over 11,000 miles, which is a lot. But in some areas, certainly folks would say that it wasn't enough, and there could always be more. We remove bandit signs from the public right-of-way. So for folks that aren't familiar with what a bandit sign is, it's a sign that is placed on the public right-of-way illegally, either on the neutral ground, on a city asset like a utility pole. So we remove thousands of signs a year as well. Provide for special event and disaster cleanups. So Mardi Gras is really a time where a lot of folks see us up close and personal, cleaning up behind the major Mardi Gras parades for the city, but also following disaster events like a tornado, hurricanes, flooding events. The Department of Sanitation stewards clean up after those events, either directly, as we've done after some recent tornadoes, or via our emergency debris contractors, like after a major event like Hurricane Ida, where we have an extended cleanup. This Department of Sanitation manages the city's recycling program, distributing carts, making sure facilitating repairs for residents. We also enforce the city's ordinances with regards to sanitation. So we currently have 5 sanitation rangers, 1 per council district for the city, and always looking to expand that number as well. We partner with neighborhoods on cleanups. We've been very busy this spring so far with a bunch of wonderful cleanups that neighborhoods have been putting on, and looking ahead to next week with the Love the Boot events happening. We're going to be really busy next week and next weekend. So excited about that as well. With regards to our contractual services, I mean, most of this revolves around the curbside collection of solid waste and recycling at locations serviced by the city. So the city provides those services for about 150,000 locations. Those are either residential or small businesses. We don't provide collection services for large commercial locations, primarily hotels, bars, and restaurants. They're required by code to have their own private collection contracts. In the French Quarter and Downtown Development District, we provide enhanced services via our contractors. Not only are they providing solid waste and recycling services, they're also doing litter removal, public litter can servicing daily, mechanical street sweeping and flushing daily, pressure washing, as well as special event and some graffiti removal as well. We do supplement the state's interstate highway sweeping and mowing and litter contracts to try to provide as much coverage for Orleans Parish as possible. And our contractors do also support us in special event cleanup. Again, when we're looking at Mardi Gras or other special events throughout the city. At the end of 2022 and then heading into 2023, a big focus for us is around the grant opportunities that was alluded to, both some smaller regional grants that we were able to secure in 2022, but of course the big federal grants that are out there, and really what could the city do to increase our overall curbside recycling participation rate and diversion rate. And you see here both of those numbers. So currently we have about 50% of the city's eligible service locations that have registered or opted into the city's recycling program. So there's a whole other half of the city in theory that is still waiting or could possibly be receiving a recycling cart to participate in curbside recycling. Our diversion rate is pretty paltry. You see there 2%. I mean, that's below even some really low numbers around the nation. So the sky's the limit when it comes to New Orleans and what we're looking to do as far as increasing our participation rate, increasing the diversion rate with regards to recycling. And we've been focusing on some key areas. So at the end of 2022, we were really lucky to partner with the Recycling Partnership on a grant that allowed us to send out some educational information to all households around recycling in the city of New Orleans. This coincided with the restart of curbside recycling in some of our service areas that recycling had been suspended post Hurricane Ida, which was really great. The education materials were really well received, but more importantly, the awareness that came along with them was amazing. We received over close to 5,000 requests for recycling carts in the month of November of last year after the mailer went out. To put that into context, we normally might receive 3,000 to 4,000 requests a year for recycling carts. So that was great to see. Certainly the demand tailored off a little bit after the initial mailers went out, but we continue to see higher requests and demand for recycling carts, which is exciting. So I think continuing to make residents aware of the program. There's no cost to receiving a curbside recycling cart if you're an eligible location to participate with the city. And then what actually is recyclable. Like we talked about, what's eligible for the City of New Orleans program to make sure that we're limiting contamination and growing that program. We have some follow-on work that's happening with the Recycling Partnership this spring. In May, we will have a composition study that will be undertaken across the city. So this will be essentially an audit of some of our neighborhoods' trash and recycling to see exactly what is in our cans, how much recyclable material are residents putting into their trash cart, and how much contamination is going in the recycling cart, maybe by mistake, on a weekly basis. So we have some consultants that'll be coming in. They'll be taking a sampling from neighborhoods across the city, extrapolating that data to really let us know, what the composition of our waste and recycling streams are. They're also going to be providing a cart set out study to let us know how many carts are actually being placed out for collection on a weekly basis. So we can see that. And those two pieces of data together, that composition study and that cart set out study, will really feed into some opportunities that we're looking to do in 2023 and 2024 with these federal grants. So we have submitted applications for some of the ISeeChange grants. We're looking really to expand the city's recycling education and outreach programs. Prior to the education mailer that went out at the end of 2022, the city really hasn't done much when it comes to information campaigns. The focus really hasn't been there. Certainly budgeting hasn't been there, but there is a focus now to grow those programs. And I think these grants that are available are really an excellent opportunity for us to take advantage of. A big goal for us is to achieve what is commonly referred to as universal carting when it comes to recycling. So everyone that's eligible for a cart having a cart. So right now, as I mentioned, only half of the service locations in the city have registered for a cart. We'd like to proactively issue a cart to the remaining 70,000 or so locations so that those folks can participate in the recycling program and ultimately lead to increasing our diversion rate there. So really optimistic about that. Obviously, the cost associated with 70,000 carts is significant, and that's where we're hoping these federal grants come into play. Another opportunity or goal for us, which is included in our climate action strategy, is to effect a solid waste master plan in 2024. So we've included that in our grant. We're looking to bring in a team to assist the city with that. That solid waste master plan will really outline the city's strategy going forward with regards to solid waste and recycling, and how we achieve the goals that we as a city want to achieve. We don't have a solid waste master plan. I don't believe that the city's ever had one. They're common in other cities. And really that roadmap allows you to set out on a path to achieve the goals that you want to. So one of the goals outlined in the climate action strategy is for us to reach a 25% diversion rate by 2030. That's great. And we've had goals in the past around diversion rate and increased recycling, but how do you actually achieve that goal? What goes into that? And that's what the solid waste master plan really outlines, the details, how you do that both logistically, from a strategy perspective, from a financial perspective, to really lay out a comprehensive plan that makes it realistic that goals can be achieved versus just putting a number out there and having no way really to get to those goals. We're also really optimistic about bringing some assets to New Orleans to help us increase recycling. So one of the major barriers that we see in southeastern Louisiana is we don't have a lot of processing capacity here in this area. We currently take our recycling material, some of it goes to a processing facility in Jefferson Parish, and the other half of the city's material goes all the way to Baton Rouge. So that's a long haul. It's not ideal. We would love to be able to position ourselves to have a material recovery facility here in New Orleans or very close by that we and our neighboring parishes could use, which would again greatly facilitate the expansion of recycling programs, increase the diversion rate, and provide valuable aftermarkets for those recyclable materials. So all of the things that we're doing currently and looking at doing in the future is currently really focused around increasing that recycling program that has been growing at a very slow pace over the past 10 or so years since it was restarted after Hurricane Katrina. I think there's a tremendous amount of potential for the city of New Orleans, obviously based on our participation in diversion rates. And with a very little amount of investment, we can see some really quick wins and some growth. And with hopefully with some significant investment via these federal grants, we can really change, what recycling looks like for the city of New Orleans and realistically achieve some of these goals that we're looking at over the next decade. And I'll be happy to, answer any questions whenever you all want to as part of the session.
Thank you so much. Matt, we have the chat is a flurry. I noticed a handful of the questions that have been asked have been addressed already. So if I skipped your question, that is probably why. I'm going to do my best to moderate and group the questions together. Early on, we got a lot of questions about signage, in particular, political signs and bandit signs. Can you explain what the difference is and who's responsible for removing those signs, especially political yard signs?
Yeah, so political signs are one of the few exceptions to bandit signs within the city code that allows for periods where they're permitted to be placed out. I won't try to off the top of my head tell you what they are, but there are time periods that allow them to be placed. Ultimately, the candidates themselves are in theory responsible for removing those signs. I think we all know that does not happen. We as a department and we as a city, I think, are very cautious when it comes to political signs because we certainly don't ever want to be accused of interfering by maybe improperly removing a sign prematurely. Sometimes it's a little challenging for the operational groups that remove bandit signs to keep track of all of the elections that are happening with the runoffs and whatnot. So we try to give the benefit of the doubt, but ultimately it's the Department of Sanitation, the Department of Parks and Parkways, the Department of Public Works that are going to be removing those signs. There are some good actors out there, some good candidates that really do go behind and remove their signs. but it's few, unfortunately.
Great. We have only a little bit of time for questions here, so we'll do our best to get any questions that we don't get answered to Matt as follow-up, but we did have a lot of questions about tires. How does that process work of getting rid of tires, and what's the city's strategy on some of the hot spots of dumping? There's also, it sounds like, some questions about whether there is a tire recycling center. So if you could explain just a little bit more about that.
Sure. So the Department of Sanitation removes waste tires from the public right of way. We probably pick up anywhere between 30 and 50,000 tires a year, year after year, if you can believe that. So an incredible number. This is all through the state of Louisiana's waste tire program. Tires that are picked up through that program are taken to Colt Tire, which is a company in New Orleans East, and that's our regional tire processor. So when we take tires there, they are processed and ultimately sent to some aftermarket purpose, and it varies depending on what's happening. Tires are probably one of the most challenging things that we deal with on a daily basis, not only because of the significant amount of tires that are dumped, but just the lack of an aftermarket use currently for waste tires. And that's really a national issue, and certainly a regional issue that we deal with. We've met with a number of groups over the past year that are hopefully coming up with innovative ways to recycle tires. When I say recycle, I don't mean just grind it up or chip it up into something that maybe can go into a landfill or maybe be used to create mulch or some type of other material, but truly take a tire and reduce it to its original state and turn it back into a new tire, like we're seeing with some other recyclable processes now. I think there's a lot of momentum behind it. I think some entities are really focused on it and are finding business models that will be profitable over a period of time, which is key, obviously, for them making their initial investment. And I think that's really where our focus is, because clearly picking up 30 to 50,000 tires a year and having it look like we didn't pick up any tires in the city of New Orleans, which in some neighborhoods it does look like that, because as soon as we pick them up, there's more tires that are deposited, is not sustainable. We need to figure out a way where the tire is an asset and someone can get value out of it so that it deters the dumping of the tire in the first place.
Thank you so much for that. I know that tires are a big challenge in many of our neighborhoods, especially out east. I have one quick question, which is, do the French Quarter and Downtown Development District pay extra for the enhanced trash services? There was a question about adjacent neighborhoods, which also have visitors dropping a lot more trash that may need additional services as well.
No. Quick answer, no.
Great. And then can you explain what a diversion rate is? The question says, is it the amount of total possible waste that could be diverted versus what is actually diverted into recycling? Is that the right way to look at it?
So the way we calculated it, it's the amount of curbside recyclable material that's diverted as a percentage of the total waste. So if you added the solid waste and the recyclable material tonnages together, that is the percentage that's the recyclable material.
Great. And then the last question I want to highlight, just for the interest of time here, is how do we engage with the Department of Sanitation? If folks want to have a cleanup in their community, what's the best way to engage with your office?
So I provided our email there. It's sanitation@nola.gov. We monitor it daily in our office. We certainly receive emails every week about neighborhood cleanups. Email us there. We have a guide which we can provide to you around some tips on doing your cleanup, how to segregate your material, how to coordinate with us for your pickup. But we're pretty prompt in doing the debris cleanup following the event. We try to get out there within a day or two to make sure we're picking it up, but certainly use sanitation@nola.gov to kind of initiate that contact with us. And we'll be glad to, get on the phone or however it's best to coordinate, details around a specific event.
Great. Thank you so much, Matt. Caroline has dropped that email address into the chat. Go ahead. There are also a lot of really beautiful ideas in the chat, Matt. If you have a chance to scroll, we'll also be saving this and sending it back out to everyone. I'll pass it back to Caroline to introduce our next speaker.
Thanks so much. Yes, thank you, Matt. That was awesome. I do wish we had time to just dance through the ideas and the questions, but as Nelly said, we'll send all this out. We'll make sure those links, those emails get to everyone in the chat, and maybe we can continue some of this at the end of the session as well. Really quickly, I'll jump back into my presentation, but really only to show our title slide, then I'll throw it over to Christopher. So Christopher and/or Chris, thanks for joining us. We're happy to have two speakers on this call speaking about trash talking in our community. So Chris is with the Department of Stormwater and Green Infrastructure, also PhD candidate at UC Santa Cruz. And Chris is actually sharing his own slides, so I probably didn't need to jump back in, but Chris, I will let you jump in and we'll go from there.
Great, thanks so much, Caroline. And this is just such a treat to be here. Thank you for organizing this event. And it's awesome to be on the call with you as well, Matt. You know, we're you know, both, I guess, colleagues now in the city. Yeah, I just am a recent hire with the stormwater team. Can you guys hear me okay?
All good.
Great. Okay. So I'll just give just a quick little background, and then I'm going to set my timer because I typically ramble, and I've been a TA for like 5 years now. So there we go. So, you know, I'm Chris. I'm from California. I'm a grad student at UC Santa Cruz. I actually study the relationship between waste, systems of waste, disposability, and environmental injustice. And through that, you know, those pursuits while I've been here, you know, I also was just kind of, you know, in the city hall a lot, just kind of learning about different issues around waste in the city, and was fortunate enough to meet some folks who needed assistance in the stormwater team. And, you know, there's a very strong relationship between waste and water in the city as well, because there's a lot of waste and there's a lot of water. And so, you know, it was a great opportunity for me. I've been working there for basically 4 weeks now. And then I'm also sort of an activist organizer. And, you know, I love talking about waste because I think it's something that really we all have a stake in and we all can contribute to. You know, it's a systemic problem, but it's also something that on the individual level, all the way up to like, you know, city and country scale, you know, there's so much room and opportunity for change. And this is a picture of me on the right. Actually, Matt, I was hired by your department before I was with the stormwater team because I worked Mardi Gras cleanup. And then this is a picture of me with a reusable bag outside of Circle Foods. So today I'm going to try to breeze through this, but you know, there's a lot. I'm going to bring up this concept of a circular economy. I think what we say is the best waste is the waste that we don't create, and that can really eliminate a lot of the costs that some are external costs that, you know, aren't necessarily people, you know, you feel them through public health, through, you know, the blightedness or the you know, the loss of visible value, but there's also environmental costs as well. Then I'll get into the social environmental impacts of plastic pollution in particular, and then I'll get into some of the solutions at different scales, from the individual, as I mentioned, all the way up to maybe the city. And then, you know, provide some resources to consider. And I have a Google Doc that I can share as well. So to talk about a circular economy, I think it's easier to bring up, first of all, what isn't a circular economy, what is a linear economy, right? And this is one that's other people might call a disposable economy or a single-use economy. So right now, 50% of all plastic items that are created in the world are meant for single use, right? Basically means 50% of the items get used once after they've been created, and then they get thrown away. And oftentimes, if they don't get thrown away in the right way, they end up in the ocean, they end up in the streets, they end up in the local environment, or they end up in the city. So part of a project that I'm really interested in exploring is how do we move from one sort of paradigm to another paradigm? And then in between that is sort of this recycling economy that has moments of circularity, but also it still is kind of in that direction of moving towards a linear model. There's still a lot of waste involved. And I want to share this quick video. It's 4 minutes long, but I think it just does more speaking than I could ever do. It's very effective with the story of plastic. And let me know if you can hear me. Great. Okay.
The audio is not quite coming through.
No audio. Okay, one second. Let me reshare.
I believe it should be in the share screen options.
Yeah, I
Share
think
audio.
I always do that and then basically share sound. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that, yeah. Slideshow. And then my time's already doing that, but let's go.
You've probably heard about a giant trash island in the ocean, or that poor sea turtle and the straw. Maybe you've even heard how plastic is being found inside the fish we eat. The plastic crisis gets a lot of attention, but the headlines usually focus on the plastic that ends up in the environment. And that's just part of the story. The truth is, plastic has a whole life cycle that's hidden from view, one that harms people and the planet from start to finish. Let's start at the beginning. Plastic is made from fossil fuels like oil or fracked natural gas. Extracting those fossil fuels and turning them into plastics creates a lot of pollution. Pollution that most often affects marginalized communities nearby. As we've gotten better about using less oil and gas to power our lives, the fossil fuel industry found a lifeline in plastics. In fact, oil and gas companies are doubling down on plastic production, with plans to build or expand over 300 petrochemical plants in the US alone by 2025. But these companies already produce more plastic than we can use. So where's all that plastic going? A lot of it's flowing into new markets, in places like Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Because more than any other product category, plastic isn't driven by the demand for it, but by the supply. Corporations like Unilever, Nestle, and Procter & Gamble are aggressively marketing single-use plastic products around the world. These companies go to places like Indonesia, where I live, and push their products onto communities that just aren't prepared to deal with all that plastic. Maybe they're used to using natural packaging. Maybe they live on a tiny island without a system of waste collection. And on top of that, countries in the global north are shipping their own plastic waste into these countries too. When you add that all up, it's no wonder so much of this plastic ends up in the environment. And globally, that's where a whopping 32% of plastic packaging ends up. 40% goes to a landfill, where plastic just piles up for future generations to deal with. And 14% is incinerated. Incineration is a nasty business, producing toxic smoke and fly ash. These super expensive facilities depend on plastic to burn everything else. It is oil and gas after all. So they want to see more plastic, not less. Then there's recycling. Unfortunately, it's not the solution that many people think it is. Just 14% of plastic packaging gets recycled, and only 2% is effectively recycled, meaning it becomes something as useful as before. The rest is downcycled into something worse. And most recycled plastic is only recycled once before ending up in landfills, incinerators, or the environment anyway. So it turns out that we can't burn, bury, or recycle our way out of this problem. And we can't just scoop all that plastic out of the environment either. That's like trying to bail out a bathtub with a teaspoon while the tap is on full blast. So how about we turn off the tap by shutting down the plastic machine? That means passing policies that create systemic change, like phasing out the single-use plastics that pollute the most, ending the fossil fuel subsidies that are fueling big plastic, and holding companies responsible for the plastic waste they create. That's how we can achieve our vision of a zero-waste future, where all of our products and packaging can be reused or repaired, effectively recycled or composted, and ultimately how we create a sustainable, circular economy that works for both people and the planet. Visit.
Okay,
You've
so
probably
that was the story of plastic, and I definitely recommend anyone go into their YouTube videos just to kind of, that really politicized me like almost 10 years ago when I learned about all of these issues when I lived on in a community that was just filled with plastic and they had to burn everything. So when I think about a circular economy, you know, the example people say, well, how do we transition to reuse? You know, I look at this example of a cafeteria, you know, a cafeteria, like possibly a college cafeteria, some high schools might have it, but one that uses durable, reusable products, right? So these would be trays with plates and bowls and cups, and then you put your food on it, you eat it, and you return it to a place that goes around a conveyor belt. And then on the back side of it, there's dishwashing, sanitizing. Maybe the food scraps are placed in a compost bin if they really got their stuff together. And then those things are dried and returned back to a place for reuse, right? In that system, it's a circular model because the waste, yes, I see there's, you know, trash in this picture, but the waste itself is pretty much contained to just food and maybe napkins, but all of the other stuff can be reused. Now compare that to other instances, you know, other examples where you might encounter a lot of waste. Like we have in New Orleans, there are over 1,400 restaurants, right? Each restaurant on average in the US produces over 100,000 pounds of trash per year. You know, that's including a lot of food waste, but it's a lot of this other packaging waste comes with to-go and other stuff related to the business. So compare these sorts of models to each other, and we can see there's a lot of avoidable plastic in our system. And what are the eco-social impacts of plastic pollution? I like to use the word eco-social. It's one of my favorite words because environmental and social is kind of clunky, and eco-social basically says the same thing, that our human environments and the natural environment are really need to be thought through the same lens. And so that linear system that the Story of Stuff project was trying to talk about, how it has negative consequences on each life cycle of the journey of the production of plastic, you know, it can't be understated, right? So there's a whole movement, the environmental justice movement that came out of the 80s, late 70s. Robert Bullard is, you know, considered one of the, you know, fathers of this movement. You know, he says America is segregated and so is pollution. Race and class still matter and map closely with pollution, unequal protection, and vulnerability. Today, zip code is still the most potent predictor of an individual's health and well-being. So across these different sections, whether it's through the extraction or the manufacturing or even the consumption, because these materials we'll see are filled with, you know, endocrine disruptors, different chemicals that are altering, you know, the genes in the body or exposing them to harmful chemicals that can create other things like cancers. And then at the very end of that linear model, there's this end stage, that's the waste stage. How do we move beyond that? Benjamin Chavis in 1987 wrote a landmark report on the state of waste and race in the country called Toxic Waste and Race, saying that 3 out of every Black or Hispanic Americans lived within 3 miles of a toxic hazardous waste site. You know, so I won't get too deep into it, but it's also thinking this plastic, and as that video had showed, is in literally everything. It's in it is the lightweight, waterproof, durable, almost a miracle product that is being way overused, right? It's also now being used in our clothing through fast fashion, right? If you look on the left, there's a red square. 63% of new clothing that's being produced is being used with plastic, right? When we're looking at our clothes, which are, you know, we want them to be cotton and they might be stretchy, or these new sweatpants that are coming out that are stretchy, those are maybe 80% polyethylene and 20% cotton to give it that elastic feel. Well, at the end of their use, while they're being used, they're splintering off into microplastics, but they're also at the end can only be landfilled or incinerated. They don't naturally re-enter the environment, and they create a lot of public health crisis to communities in the global South who receive all of this extra type of plastic. Way under time. Okay, there's a history here. The plantation turned into the oil plantation, right? And so there's this relationship between wealth that was extracted from labor, the river, the Mississippi River, and its strategic location for commerce, and also now who bears the burden of this new form of pollution through all of these 150 plus oil refinery and petrochemical facilities that are lined along the side from Baton Rouge to New Orleans, right? Making various types of chemicals. A lot of them are additives to make into plastics. There's more than 100 different types of plastics. We say, 1 through 6, and then there's 7, which is other, but they have so many different additives that it's very hard to sort them appropriately. You know, I don't want to spend too much time on the environmental justice component because there is a lot of other stuff to talk about. But in terms of the whole country, this region has been kind of slated as what people might call the sacrifice zone for oil production. And it's not a coincidence when you look here at the Gulf of Mexico in terms of toxic disposal rates in comparison to any other aquatic body of water. The Great Lakes is less. And then when you look at it on a per square mile basis, it's almost 2.5 times less, right? So the Gulf of Mexico is bearing the brunt of that. We also look at the sort of distribution of race across this country, and you can see that this is the most heavily populated region in the country, district in the country, with African Americans. The landfill itself, right, is not an endpoint, and it's not a neutral endpoint. A lot of times we say what we throw away is just out of sight, out of mind. But for many communities who have to live next to a landfill or on top of a landfill, which is close to home, here in New Orleans, just yesterday, the Gordon Plaza residents, received basically offer letters for their new homes for fully funded relocation. They've been fighting for multiple decades to basically get relocated after being sold houses on top of a toxic landfill. When I'm from in Santa Cruz, there are, a lot of surfers, that's, West Coast, California. The neoprene that comes from that also contributes to a community that has, according to one article, over 50 times the national average of cancer. Neoprene, I would consider also a type of plastic. Plastic is a very versatile thing, like you were mentioning, Nelly, in terms of it can look a lot of different ways and it's very versatile, right? But at the end of the stage, it's going to either have to be incinerated, landfilled, or repurposed into things, but it's not going to re-enter into an organic state. So I appreciate everyone who was saying that they like, to be leaves and other things as well. So, okay. I have two, I'm gonna try to go real quick. Okay, so why is plastic seemingly so unavoidable in today's society and in New Orleans in particular? Well, we can make some hypotheses. Maybe this has some impact on, the relationship between plastic and New Orleans. We look at these refineries, but we also know there's a on the go parade culture here. The open container laws here, loose containers, so people like to move around. So all of these things sort of add up to create these waste crises that, the Department of Sanitation is trying to manage as well, that Matt was talking about, right? And it's an uphill battle to continually try to manage because there is too much to begin with. And the issue is systemic. We can't necessarily opt out as individuals. We can try our best, but that doesn't actually stop it at its core. And as someone who works with stormwater and green infrastructure, I'm really interested in how plastic and water connect in the city. What about plastic and climate change? If plastic was a country, it'd be the 5th leading emitter of carbon emissions, right? This is a cost for the city to continually clean out, right? Through the Mardi Gras parade culture, but also just endless supply of single-use disposals for everyday transactions. There are over 72,000 catch basins in this city. Right. So if you divide that by the amount of days in a year, that's how many the DPW is supposed to be, if they were to do them all in 1 year, right? That's how much they would be having to do per day. Right. So this is almost unreasonable burden on the city to try to manage when we're having all these crises. So my next question is, if it's so catastrophic on all of these different, levels, from the environmental justice component to the environmental health component to the stormwater management component, also to the economic component of who's benefiting from all these micro dependencies on plastic. Where is that money going, right? What happens if we just refuse it outright? What happens when we can collectively say no? What opportunities arise? So this is where we get to reuse. And, there's solutions at very different scales, right? There's behavioral
Chris, I gotta
change.
give you just like a 1 minute warning. We love it. We
1
love
minute.
it. Just gotta give you that time, that countdown.
We got you. Okay, behavioral changes on the individual level. All right. We all know we're gonna go eating and drinking every day, right? Drinking water, whatever. We can have those on an individual level. It doesn't change the culture, and actually it's still very difficult because there's still a culture to, you know, throw plastics even if we ask not to get them. Restaurants, there can be subsidies on the level of the city to transition restaurants out of a single-use model. It's shown that they can, by just investing over $500 to replace their disposables with reuse model, they can save up to $20,000 per year, and at the same time reduce this plastic and trash that would show up in the streets. Policies on the city level. Oregon has a bottle bill for 10 cents where that keeps the trash out of the city, and customers are incentivized to return that where they can get a refund. Plastic bag bans policies, skip the stuff bills, reducing how many billions of disposables that we're using just from low-hanging fruit policy choices that could help save both the aesthetic value and the cost for the city itself. So there's a myriad of solutions that we can do. I just want to, I'll provide a lot of these resources to folks, and in the chat, I just want to highlight some opportunities to engage with Earth Day. You know, there's the Bundy Road cleanup. You know, Culture of Cleanliness is doing some amazing work on litter abatement. If you know any Black youth who are you know, looking for some extra money, but also, you know, switched into, you know, plastic, this is a way to you know, support folks who are wanting to learn about plastic pollution. And I just want to say thank you, and sorry for taking too much time. You can reach me at
Chris. No apology needed. I apologize for trying to squeeze two amazing speakers into one session. That was super awesome. I love the deep dive. I love all the things you brought in. And really quick, we're going to run through that. Let me just share my screen. We're going to run through how we can take what we've heard from Matt, how we can take what we've heard from Chris and turn it into action on our end. Just on that follow-up piece, Chris, definitely share those resources in the chat. Share those resources with me and Nellie. We're going to send out anything you want on the events and links. We want to make sure that we can keep this conversation going, and we can also stay on in the chat after we work through this next session. Flagging, we might run over in time. Stay on if you can. If you can't, we'll miss you. Watch the recording and we'll follow up next week. We just spent some time building our knowledge. We do want to just walk through how you can share your story on ISeeChange to help inform some of those initiatives that both Matt and Chris were talking about. Super fast, for those who aren't familiar, ISeeChange is a platform where community members can share their experiences. We connect those experiences with cities, engineers, nonprofits, researchers, decision makers trying to make a difference. In New Orleans, we're hoping to understand the efforts with Healthy Gulf and Committee for a Better New Orleans. What are priorities turning up across the city? Are you worried about flooding? Are you worried about trees? Are you worried about energy dumping? What's going on in your community? Each post you share is packed full of data. It will tell us where the thing is happening. Images will provide context. Your language will provide a lot of necessary details. And in addition to that, you can take sensor measurements. Give me a call if you want to host a rain gauge or a heat sensor. And we'll also pair, all of that is automatically paired with weather data at that point in time. So what does this look like when we're talking trash on today's topic? I'm gonna run through these stats again, check out that recording. A lot of people have been posting about dumping. A lot of these are in New Orleans. That's a huge topic here. We'll also see what that other people throughout the country have been talking about. The photos here are showing the extent of dumping, and I'm just gonna scoop my little Zoom thing out of my way. We're hearing people talking about blight when this topic comes up, and we're also seeing people weigh in on trends over time. So the language is really bolstering what they're showing through an image. Here, this is one of our community engagement leaders, this is at the Lincoln Beach Center. We have someone both documenting an issue and also the solutions being used to help address it. So they've recruited a friend to help clean these things up. They're tracking the trash, what they're seeing on the lot, and then they're also tracking trends across the city. So what's going on in other parts of New Orleans. One of the things that we've started to notice and we think is really high leverage is tracking waste life cycles. So here you can see people are like zooming in on the trash, which feels a bit weird, but it's actually really helpful. This can help us identify where our trash is coming from. People, again, documenting cleanup efforts, getting really detailed on where the trash or what the trash is, and then touching into that petroleum industry, many of the things Chris was touching on, and what are the environmental impacts, what are the climate impacts, who are the players that might be responsible. And then also lots of people talking about, because many people care about, what are the impacts to wildlife. Seeing similarly, how is this being documented in a water setting? So New Orleans is a port city. We don't often see the water, even though we live right next to it. So what are people able to document in terms of how pollutants are happening in the water? This is another culture of cleanliness shout out. One of our community engagement leads led a cleanup. And this is, really showing the severity of the issue. We're seeing dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of needles that have been collected during a cleanup. This tells a really deep story. This is not just what trash is on our community. This is an issue of public safety and public health. And documenting these cleanups leads a great example for others, and also connects people throughout the community. This one really is interesting too, because it ties back into what Chris was talking about holding different businesses accountable for what they're up to and their waste. I will say this is Sage Michael's post. He would be on the call, but he had another exciting meeting to lead, doing some awesome environmental work. And he actually got to have a conversation with the business associated with this post, and he saw that they were making changes. This was not something they had intentionally done, but this is a way to hold people accountable. So if you see a business, or you see maybe trash from a specific place popping up, it's worth snapping a photo, it's worth telling that story, and it might just drive a positive conversation going forward. Here again, just looking at different examples, this is really getting into what different types of, this is a little more in the runoff and that pollution situation, but what are the impacts people are seeing in the water? So lots of different things, negative impacts of eutrophication, and then the calls to action. What are people expecting? What do they want from their elected leaders? Another big one, just as Chris was talking about, is what happens with our stormwater systems. This is really straightforward, but in this area should point right here, but it's showing that blockage. This is powerful. I want to see what this street looks like when it's flooding, because this is certainly not draining at full capacity. We're seeing this all around New Orleans. People are showing where storm drains are being blocked, and it's definitely an issue. And then also people are saying, I'm gonna elect to help clean it. Chris flagged how many storm drains there are and that burden that there is on the city. So we want to both flag these areas of concern to watch, and then also talk about solutions as a community. And this is a really interesting flip on that. This is during a flood. How do we also expect waste management to proceed? So when we have flooded streets, that's really going to cause some problems for waste management workers as they're on the ground trying to wade through flooded streets. So just keeping in mind how those things turn on both sides. And then also, of course, we're always talking about solutions. We've got people doing cleanups all over. It's really been an amazing thing. Both Matt and Chris alluded to these, and I know lots of partners on the call have been involved. We want to build community support. We want to share our wins as well as the issues that we're seeing. And then tracking the trash throughout those cleanups helps us identify the sources, follow the life cycle, and then encourages this behavior for others throughout the community. So leading by example, documenting great efforts, and even the creative things like where people are finding ways to reuse materials. We don't want to put the burden on the people, but it is fun to celebrate where we're able to find those moments for reuse. Thank you for bearing with us, recognizing we're at 7:01. My last request, thank you for staying on. We want your eyes. If you were here last week, or if you're brand new, I'm about to pop a QR code up in a second, and it will also come to you in the follow-up email. Join us in sharing your experience around the trash talk on ISeeChange. Where are you seeing litter or dumping in your neighborhood? I bet you money, you can go not far, maybe a house or two down, and you could have something to share. Talk about how it's impacting you. Talk about how it might impact your kid, or, you know, your daily life. If you've got a pet who's walking around and there's glass on the street. What's the main source of waste you've noticed in your community? Are you finding that it's dumping from other neighborhoods? Are you finding that it's just regular litter? Are you finding you're seeing, you know, like oil slicks or leaks in the water leaking down the street? And what solutions would you like to see more? So Matt also had mentioned an initiative where they're looking to find where should we place more trash bins throughout the city? This is a great start. If you find that there's a block where people seem to treat it like a trash can, that's a post. That's a post of, we would like a trash can here. We can help relay those messages to the city and inform where more trash cans are needed. This is tonight that we're talking, but we are going to keep on working through this series throughout the month. Please join us next week. Please invite friends, colleagues, anyone, you know, in your network. We're going to talk complete streets, which is transportation and street health, trees and heat and flooding. And I'm gonna pop this up. And Nellie, I think I got your email right. I will be honest, I typed that in out of memory, which might be wrong. So please correct me if that's wrong. But if you have questions for us, please feel free to email. We can stay on for a few minutes. Scan this to get started and tracking your experience. And also a massive thank you to Matt and Chris on providing so many great insights on this topic today. So I will be quiet, and I don't know if we want to stay on for questions or if people want to get their Wednesday night back and get out of here. But thank you again for you guys being here, because you're the key to this. So appreciate you. And if anyone wants to unmute too, feel free to jump in with a question. I'll be here for a few more minutes, or if we're good.
Matt, there was someone I got put in touch with, Matt, on Instagram. I don't know do you use Instagram, Matt? Or does the Department of Sanitation use it at all?
We don't as a department. We're not very advanced on social media.
So there's someone named Colin Wheatley with the group called Mid City Litter Pickups, and he had brought up to me that there's this place on Tulane Ave hits Norman C. Francis, that he was thinking about that same question of like where to put some more containers, because they just get filled up really fast. I don't know if that would be sanitation or parks and parkways, because it's kind of in that neutral ground area, but I'll forward him your email.
Yeah, we put some new litter cans on Norman C. Francis in 2022 before our inventory ran out, but there's certainly a lot of opportunity for additional cans, both on the neutral ground and on the side streets off Norman C. Francis.
Great. I just want to jump in and say this has been one of my favorite sessions. I'm sorry I've been off camera and off mic most of this session because I've got children on spring break, 3 of them, and they can jump in any second. But I just wanted to make sure you knew that we love, there are so many posts about litter on ISeeChange. Next to flooding, it's one of the most popular topics. So we'd love to figure out ways that we can support you, Matt and Chris, in your efforts to both stop trash from the start, from the very beginning, and that's a culture change, but also really literally, talk about where things can be deployed to help manage that waste. And Matt, so we will follow up with you about the criteria you're looking for spots. And we'll start serving you some data already, because we are working with the city of New Orleans in a formal partnership this year. So everyone, if you want to put a trash can out, show us where it is. Tell Chris, tell your friends at Mid City Litter, like, go for it, post it, and show us what it is. And looking at the decision criteria around those spots, because it's a really interesting opportunity that isn't really hard for our ISeeChange crew to do. Yeah, super cool. Also, the sampling of the map for the master plan is something I just want to spend a whole time on and figure out. I think that I just recently did a presentation on the post that we see on ISeeChange, in which we see trash in the street, but we also see all the posts coming from upriver communities about pollution. And that is something that we uniquely should be tackling and leading the way on here in New Orleans and Greater New Orleans and Louisiana. So I think this is a ripe place for ideas. So all those ideas in the chat, go out and use your phones and show us what you mean. And we're good solutions out there of big ideas. The critical thing for us to be solving around.
Thank you very much for hosting. I really appreciate it. Matt, by any chance, are you going to be participating in the Civic Academy program at the mayor's office?
I'm not on the agenda for these. From time to time, we do get invited to attend and present. So if that invitation comes to us, we'll certainly take them up on it.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, y'all. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Chris and Matt. You guys led an excellent session. If you guys have any last notes or thoughts, feel free to jump in. Otherwise, we're going to share the chat. We're going to share whatever resources Matt and Chris want to send out, upcoming events, be in touch. We have so much more I feel like we could talk about here right now, but I do want to be mindful of everyone's time, and the recording will also go out. But please, if you have more questions and more thoughts, create an account and make it a post too. We can move the conversation into ISeeChange and show everyone what we're thinking about and what solutions are on our minds. You know, it's a really nice, like, direct way to get our dialogue going as well. So I encourage you to scan that QR code if you're not already on there. And thank you, Nellie and Jordan, for joining us and helping us host. And with that, I will probably sign off unless anyone has any last thoughts.
Cool. Well, thanks, you guys. Really appreciate it. Thanks again, Matt. I look forward to deepening a partnership with you guys.